All right, yo, 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 yo. What's up? What's up? What's up? Give up the rock. Good morning. Well, from where I am, good morning. And to anyone living in the past, welcome to the future. It is Monday where I am, 9th of December, and we may have a revolution on our hands. Yeah. Let's chat about a potential revolutionary event. Good morning, Wings of Cheese, Honey 32. Nice to see you in the chat already. Very keen. I like to see that. Love to see that. So yeah, I thought today we should go across. Um, yeah, patoti. Yeah, what does that mean? I wonder if that's code for something. But yeah, I thought we should go across an actual like live revolutionary event. Hey, I don't think we've ever done that on this channel before. Well, like we haven't really done too much live stuff, but like really, really covered something that's really, I don't know, pertinent or happening like as we speak kind of thing. I know Wings of Cheese, you've asked for a couple of more relevant and up to date kind of revolutionary scenarios. But yeah, I thought, while the Syrians are doing their thing, we should at least have a look at it, have a discussion about it. And then like we can go on to some other topics and stuff like that. But like, it's breaking news. So like if you're not across what's happened or what's happening in Syria at the moment, or over the last, I don't know, like week or two, um, the Syrian government has kind of been challenged to its core by rebel groupings or oppositional factions, however you want to say it, um, in Syria. I'll just give you some context because, like, obviously, I am not an expert on all this sort of stuff, and so like, I need context all of the time. I think it helps. So for anyone who's not too across this whole geopolitical situation, this is Syria, like within this red line. Can you actually see my map properly? I don't know if you can. Let's zoom out a little bit. Then you can see it. Okay. Yeah, so this is the Mediterranean. Hey, over here, this yellow part is Egypt, Israel. Hey, contentious. Lebanon. So Syria is like kind of set back, mostly. It kind of borders with Iraq, and Lebanon. And it has like a little bit of access along here to the Mediterranean. But most of it's kind of like the majority of the country kind of, I guess, is not bordered by water, and it kind of is south of Turkey, so it's in like kind of a critical area in the Middle East or Asia Minor, that intersection between the Asia region and the European continent. Um, hey, sorry, I could see the stream. It was bugged for me. You couldn't. Oh, yeah, and you can see it fine now. Just check my vitals over here. I think the connection is okay. Um, but I'm glad you're back in. I wish I could have this accent. Which accent? If you'd like an Australian accent, we can teach you, don't worry. Um, Unless you're talking about having a Syrian accent, which I don't know if I can replicate. Mr. Do you think about cultures that have some prejudice built into it? I think we should leave it alone because it's a culture. I think we should leave it alone because it's a culture. If you're talking about like whether cultures have, yeah, I need some context if that's what you're offering. But all cultures have prejudice built into them to some degree. I don't think there's really any human cultures that don't have prejudice. Like at least between them as the in group and people from the outside, they just have natural tendencies towards that. So I don't think you're ever going to get rid of that. It's just how severe the prejudice is. Like if people have prejudices that they act on, because like you can have a prejudice, right? Like you can not like something or someone, um, but like if you act on it, I think that's the big problem. Like in some indigenous cultures around here and back then where I live, rape is considered normal, and they used to bury twin babies. Wow. Especially within the confines of statehood, whose consent is manufactured. Um, yeah, look, cultural nuances and traditions, like that try to answer. Yeah, holy crap, I know, right? That's mental. What's wrong with twins? Unless this is some type of mystical kind of thing, or like a superstition. A lot of cultures throughout history have had some very strange superstitions and very strange practices based on nothing. But like I would say that in the 21st century, um, another thing, the law, another thing. Yeah, holy crap. I don't know what else to say to you, but like, yeah, in the 20th century onwards, I would say, maybe even the 19th century onwards, like science has been able to get rid of a lot of these superstitions that pervaded cultures for a long time. Age of consent is 14, which means I cannot do nothing about the 15-year-old girls in my class being pregnant from a 49-year-old man. This is a heavy topic. Um, that really seems to be something that you're dealing with. You brought it up a number of times, um, and like that's where culture comes in too, right? Because like physiologically speaking, you know, females can get pregnant. Yeah, it seems to be like quite the issue. Because you brought up like cases or examples of this um, before. So um, something must be happening. But like, yeah, physiologically speaking, girls can get pregnant or women can get pregnant from a young age. But then if you have like a 49-year-old man that's involved in that somehow, that comes down to a cultural question. And you could argue that a cultural prejudice would be that culture wouldn't allow a 49-year-old man to get a 15-year-old girl pregnant. There would be a cultural barrier there. So like prejudice don't always have to be a negative thing and prejudice, the word prejudice doesn't have to be pejorative, doesn't have to mean that you're speaking about something in a negative way. So if you have a cultural tradition that stops those things from happening, or a cultural tendency that stops something like what you're describing from happening, then that's a good thing because it protects certain people. So cultural prejudices, while um, a they can be very outdated and they can carry negative consequences. Sometimes having constraints on things is not a problem at all. It's supposed to regulate human behavior because just because humans can do something like get pregnant or procreate with someone that's generations younger than them doesn't mean that they should. So I hope that sheds some light on the topic for you. I mean, the prejudice that comes from inside this culture. Well, like again, prejudice comes from within, um, against minorities or for minorities. Um, yeah, that's a difficult question, and like I don't know how to answer that, to be honest. It's a very very difficult question. And like, let me just say this though, and like I know I sound like I'm always bringing it back to this, but like that is the point of this channel. Um, a revolution, right? A social revolution, changing the way that society is structured and how we place values on things, should change cultural values as well, and like should do away with some more archaic um, cultural prejudices that linger on under capitalism and linger on as a result of like kind of ruthless free market ethics. So like not placing value on human life and like human experience and emotions and psychology, because like everything has a price on it. So like, you know, at the end of the day, money will solve everything. And so like if we got rid of that outlook, that way of looking at the world, that, you know, as long as you can pay for, you know, I don't know, treatment or an abortion or psychological therapy or something like that, then everything will be okay. If we stop looking at the world in those terms, then like culture will change. Because I see a lot of people saying that we cannot change it because it's culture and tradition, but if we keep on this line of thought, you know, things won't change. No, and that's why I'm bringing up revolution, and that's why we are revolutionaries on this channel, because like I do think a lot of things can be addressed. I'm not saying things will be solved, but a lot of things can be addressed again if we take away. Well, you think it is a crime, and like, you know, in the sense that like it's unjustifiable to a certain extent. Like you just really can't justify that type of stuff. Um, it's very very hard to, and so like yeah, cultural barriers usually are set up in a way to take care of like some of these very very human indiscretions, and really yeah take them out of the equation so people don't have to deal with this type of stuff. It is abhorrent. It is what you're describing is absolutely crazy. Um, but yeah, so look, I think we might have to like dedicate an actual stream to this, or like an actual video of some sort, where we talk about these topics properly. Because like, you know, they're important, and like yeah, and heavy as. But look, just back to context on Syria. So just in case you weren't aware, this is where or why the news is going off at the moment. This is the place. It's quite a large landmass in the Middle East, if you ask me. I know there's bigger ones, but like compared to like its neighbors, it's pretty chunky, pretty weighty place. Um, and I was going to take the live stream in the direction where we kind of we look at the history of Syria as much as we can, like the more modern history of Syria, just so to give us all some context before we jump into what's recently happened. Um, and it is very, very, very war torn, this place. And like, you know, it's been subject, like a lot of the Middle East, it's been subject to a lot of disturbances and unrest. So let's just have a quick look at someone giving us a bit of a history behind what's happening so we can understand it
Brought to you
a
by
little bit
Brilliant.
better.
For the past few years, the situation in Syria has been relatively calm. Bashar al-Assad has reasserted control over most of the country, but a ceasefire negotiated by Turkey and Russia in 2020 has preserved a rebel holdout in the northwest, while a continued US military presence.
So this is Assad. He was the leader in Syria up until like, I don't know, a few hours ago. You know, like half a day ago. And so like just again to give you some more context, this is what the map we were just looking at before. This is their coastline. So there's a small part of Syria that touches it. This is Lebanon. Here, so the capital is around here somewhere, Damascus, which has just fallen. Damascus has fallen. Bangladesh, I think, is still at war. I don't remember, but I think there's some turmoil in Bangladesh as well. But like this area here, you can see that faint line. I think that's a river. And like behind that, there's a whole section here that's under control. So it was never controlled by this guy, Assad. You can see that green area there. That was like a rebel stronghold. So Idlib, I think these rebels here were supported by the Turks. So Turkey, however you say it now. And then like the Russians have been supporting Assad massively. And so has Iran been supporting Assad, from what I can understand. Rojava, is that's the the people that you've been speaking about? Because I think they're like a Marxist revolutionary party or something like that. And like they're of the SDF. Huh. Yeah, Ukraine has fallen off the conversation a bit, hasn't it? It's funny how it works, how like everything goes in trends. Um, it's still going though, Ukraine, don't get me wrong. But like, yeah, but like, apparently that's why this has happened. Actually, it's funny that you bring up, similar to Marxists, kind of like anarcho-communists, not entirely. That's interesting. Okay, nice. I'll have to look into it. It is on my list, I swear. Um, but like, yeah, apparently that's why all of this is happening because Assad, old mate Assad over here, needs a lot of help from the Russians. And the Russians have been involved over the last like couple of years now, or a few years now. They've been heavily involved with the Ukraine, so they're not helping out the Assad regime like they were before. And so Assad's come under a lot of pressure recently, like internally, and the rebels, I think, kind of got wind of that, and so because Russia's preoccupied, apparently Iran is preoccupied now with what's going on with Israel. Um, Assad's regime has kind of fallen apart without Russian assistance and Iranian assistance. But sorry, I'll continue with the context. This is a website or a news site that 4IS put me onto, TLDR News Global. They seem to be pretty balanced, actually. So like, just if you're, I don't know, ever looking for some world news, completely independent and privately owned media company that's not afraid to tackle issues that we think are most important. A small group of young people run it, hoping to pass on our enthusiasm for politics to other young people. Only fan source, with most of our funding coming from donations and ad revenue. No shady corporations. No one telling us what to say. Can't wait to grow further and help. This is pretty cool, actually. TDR. Like, 4AS finds some gold out there. Good old 4AS. Sometimes we are debating something and I don't understand the words, the English, everything. I don't know if I'm advanced enough in those terms to understand those debates. Fine. I can't add the subtitles like I do with your recorded videos. Oh, that might be because of the latency as well. So like if I turn down the latency on the stream to a low latency, I think you can still have subtitles. Like YouTube will convert my talk into subtitles. So like next time I do a stream on YouTube, I will change my settings and you tell me if you can see subtitles on it. And that might make a big difference for you. Um, I mean, it's not that fine. When me and MysterE were discussing about cultures, in fact, I understood, but I didn't. Yeah, okay. Well, let me try next time I do a stream. Like I said, let me change a setting for you, and we might be able to get you to a position where you can actually have some subtitles, which might help. YouTube doesn't always pick up on my accent very well, but for the most part, it's pretty good. All right, let us continue with some context for ye old Syria.
Has shielded a de facto Kurdish state in the northeast. However, in part thanks to the instability in and around Israel, over the past few months, conflict has flared up again. And on Wednesday, anti-Assad rebels staged a shockingly successful offensive into the outskirts of Syria's second largest city, Aleppo. So in this video, we're going to take a look at this new rebel offensive, why it's all kicking off now, and what might come of it. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So let's start with a little bit of context. The Syrian civil war started in 2011 with the Arab Spring, as Syrians across the country rose up against dictator Bashar al-Assad. Assad came to power in 2000, succeeding his father Hafez, who had himself ruled Syria.
Isn't that crazy? Like they literally have like like a leader who is also from a prominent family that was also um, in power, I think, since the 70s or something like that. So they basically have like a monarchy. Like he's taken over from his father, who was president before him, and all that sort of stuff. So like, yeah, there's a, like a yeah, a monarchy going on in Syria, and apparently they're from like these people Assad, the Assads. They come from a very particular area on the coast of Syria, and they're like a minority. So they're really like a ruling class. This like Assad and his political group. They're not the main ethnic majority or one of the main ethnic majorities in Syria. They're a small, yeah, like I said, a small minority, but they're the political establishment. They're the political ruling class. It's crazy how all this stuff still works. Like, in the 21st century, it's almost like, you know, it's like a monarchy, and it's a class system, a class society. What did I miss? And the folks really stopped talking about Ukraine, didn't they? I started thinking the war was over. Yeah, you know you wouldn't be wrong in the sense of being tricked into thinking that Ukraine has kind of just fizzled out into nothingness because you hardly hear it like you did before. But like it's still raging. The war is still raging on in the background.
Syria since 1971. The protests quickly spiraled into a civil war, largely thanks to a predictably vicious response from Syrian security forces. The Syrian civil war is still ongoing and is infamously complicated, but it can broadly be split into three phases. The first.
Okay, so since the Arab Spring in 2011, so the Arab Spring was like a time when like all of these Arab nations started kind of having mass protests and demonstrations, and like all the people started rising up and deposing like autocratic leaders, like and like there was a series of countries that like kind of went through this, and so Syria was one of them, and like it seems like they've been fighting ever since internally, that is. So the Assad regime, they tried to depose him in terms of like rebel forces within Syria, who are all backed by external players, let's be honest. So the Turks are backing the current rebels, HTS, who have taken power now and finally toppled Assad. And like I think even the Kurds are getting backing from like the US and stuff like that. So like all these rebel groups, they're just trying to, obviously take power, but they're trying to claim areas of Syria for their own. But like the most recent rebel uprising, it would seem from this, who is like kind of coordinated by this group called HTS. Um, they want Syria for themselves, whereas the Kurds, I think, kind of want part of Syria, part of Turkey, part of Iran for their ethnic group. Um, but like it'll explain more of that. Yo 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 yo, what's up? What's up? Give up the rock for IS. We're talking about Syria. There is potentially a revolution that has unfolded. We're not covering Rojava um, yet. Yet. We're just covering what's happened recently with the Syrian revolution, or potential revolution. We'll get to that. And we're just getting some context. We're actually using TLDR News, which is something that you put me onto for IS. And like they seem to be pretty good. They're like independent news source. And so like they don't seem to get funding from anyone. So like they're outside of um the clutches of the media establishment or some type of rich donor. Yeah, they're all right. They're all right. And so like, you can get some balanced kind of journalism going on potentially, unless they have their own agendas. But like they're going to take us through kind of the history of what's been happening in Syria since, at least the last decade and a bit.
First comes from about 2011 until about 2015, when, largely thanks to indirect support from a number of NATO states and Gulf monarchies, anti-Assad rebel forces made impressive gains, capturing the regional capitals of Raqqa in 2013 and Idlib in 2015. The second phase, which we might call the ISIS phase, slightly overlaps with the first phase, running from 2014 until about 2017. This is when basically everyone got together to push back ISIS, which capitalized on the political instability in Syria and neighboring Iraq to establish a caliphate, which, at its peak, covered roughly 100,000 square kilometers and 10 million people. By the end of 2017, however, ISIS were almost entirely defeated. To push back ISIS, the West...
Have you ever considered at-home needling? This is
Oh
Cure's
my God.
micro-infusion system. Now, it's gone viral several
The US stepped entirely defeated. To push back ISIS, the West, and especially the US,
Yeah, where is
stepped
he?
up their support for the Kurds, a stateless ethnic group spread across southeast Turkey, northwestern Iran, northern Iraq, and northern Syria. Similarly, both to push back ISIS and to protect their ally, both Russia and Iran stepped up their support for Assad. This takes us on to the third phase, which runs from about 2016 until 2020. The Kurds established a relatively large autonomous zone in the north, thanks to American support, while Assad, with Russian and Iranian support, started recapturing territory from the rebels. In early 2020, it looked like the rebels, who were confined to just the northwest corner of Syria around Idlib, might be wiped out. But in March, Turkish President Recep Erdogan negotiated a ceasefire with Russian President Vladimir Putin. For context, Erdogan backs the rebels, both because he wants to use them to push back against the Kurds, for a fear that a de facto Kurdish state in northern Syria would both stoke separatist sentiment in Turkey and provide a base for Kurdish terrorist groups like the Kurdistan Workers' Party, and because he's never got on...
Are those your boys? Wings of cheese? I love ads. MysterE, I hate the ads. I fucking hate them. I can't stand them. They piss me off. But I understand why they're necessary for YouTube. But yes, one day I will get the funds behind this organization and we'll get some YouTube premium. We'll never have to deal with this again. I swear. But like, are these your boys? Wings of cheese. If you got a communist style like that, eh? Eh? Looks like them.
on with Assad for a variety of reasons. Anxieties about Kurdish separatism are what motivated
I've been fighting Turkey for 50 years. You are a revolutionary historian. There we go. We have to do some research.
Turkey's numerous incursions into northern Syria between 2016 and 2019, which created a sort of buffer zone along the Turkey-Syria border. Broadly speaking, the ceasefire held, leaving 4 de facto states within what used to be Syria: a Kurdish state in the rural northeast, a Turkish buffer state within that, a rebel stronghold in Idlib, and then the rest of the country, which is now controlled by Assad. This means that Assad now controls about 60% of Syria's territory and the vast majority of its population. However, a couple of days ago, the violence restarted in earnest when the main Islamist rebel group, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, launched an assault from its territory in Idlib towards government-held positions around Aleppo, a city that had once been a rebel bastion but was recaptured by government forces in 2016 after a months-long siege. The offensive began on Wednesday, and the rebels made swift progress, seizing the Syrian army's 46th Regiment's base and a handful of villages in the first 24 hours. On Thursday, they cut off the M5 highway at 2 points: the Aleppo suburb of Khan al-Assal and the town of Saraki. For context, the M5 highway is basically the
The M5. So good. If anyone's familiar with Sydney's traffic woes, I love how they call it the M5. Yeah, it's confirmed. Oh, it's coming.
most important road in Syria, and it connects Aleppo to the capital Damascus. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, at least 200 people have been killed in the fighting so far. It's hard to know exactly how things are progressing, but as of Friday morning, it looks like the rebels had reached the western outskirts of Aleppo, which is pretty terrible news for Assad. So why has this happened now? In other words, why is a ceasefire that held for 4 years suddenly collapsed? Well, as we see it, there are two main reasons. First, what's happening in and around Israel. Israel's assault on Hezbollah in Lebanon meant that Iran and Hezbollah, who both back Assad, had to redirect their forces and attention to southern Lebanon. It's no coincidence that this assault started just a day after Netanyahu announced a new ceasefire in Lebanon. HTS will have wanted to attack before Hezbollah had time to redeploy its forces.
Apparently, Israel has now started attacking the southern part of Syria, which is interesting. You know, wonder what they're playing at. Apparently, there's some bases in the bottom of Syria, military bases, that is, and they've started bombing them or striking them somehow. Israel. Some loose cannons.
Back to Syria. HTS will have also been helped by the recent Israeli airstrikes on Hezbollah and Iranian positions in Syria, which has weakened government forces. The second reason is the recent uptick in Syrian and Russian airstrikes against rebel positions. For context, over the past month or so, pro-Assad Syrian government forces have been striking rebel targets in Idlib, which many analysts suspected was a precursor to a new offensive against the rebels. Now, this might sound a bit weird, given what we've just said. After all, why would Assad and co try a new offensive when Hezbollah and Iran are preoccupied with Israel? And, well, it's hard to say, but it's probably in part because they thought that they could do it after the ceasefire in Lebanon, and because, until recently, it looked like Assad might be able to convince Turkey to wind down support for the rebels. The thinking here was that, given Assad's dominant position in Syria, Turkey might support Assad to both squeeze the Kurds and to make Syria politically stable enough that Erdogan could return at least some of the 3.6 million Syrian refugees currently living in Turkey. There were some tentative signs that things were moving in this direction. In July, for instance,
That's a lot. Love the ads. Want to see the Aussie ads. Classy accent they have. Yeah, 4AS is just more classy. That's why it's more subtle. But like, that's a lot of refugees from Syria in Turkey. 3.6 million people. That's mental. I always like to compare it to this because like it just gives you a good visual. But like if you have a massive stadium at a football event, like a soccer match or something like that, you have like 100,000 people in it. It's a big group of people. Like if you look across a stadium that's filled with 100,000 people, like it's a massive number. So if you put that into context and think that there's 3.6 million Syrian refugees housed in Turkey at the moment, like that's mental. That is a huge number of people. Like 30 stadiums full chockers full of people just like hanging out in Turkey. And like obviously he wants to, get them to go back to Syria. Huge population.
Erdogan said he hoped to meet Assad for the first time in more than a decade. But the fact that this assault has gone ahead just 2 days after Erdogan had a call with Putin suggests that he is no longer so keen on mending ties with Assad. Anyway, this rebel assault would have been intended both to preempt any government offensive and to placate the locals in Idlib, who didn't like their homes were getting pounded by airstrikes. So, what happens next? Well, while many of our viewers might find it satisfying seeing the rebels deal a bloody nose to Assad, Putin and the Ayatollahs, the risk here is that this violence shatters Syria's fragile peace, which would be terrible news for ordinary Syrians, at least in the short term. As you've hopefully realised after an 8-minute video explaining the Syrian civil war, you'll have noticed that here at TLDR News, we're committed to helping you learn.
And here's time for your shameless plug. I'll leave you right there. TLDR News, but thank you very much. You have to leave though. Oh. See you later, Beta. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you shortly. All right. That's some pretty good context, I think, about like what the hell has happened in Syria over like the last like 10 to 12 years, basically from the Arab Spring kind of up until now. It gives us a lot of good context to work with. I seem to have 6 people watching so far. There's a few people talking in the chat. If you are watching, say hello in the chat. If you have any questions about what's going on, don't be shy. Like as the name suggests, if that's why you clicked on it, we're talking about Syria. Okay, so Syria has just, by my patoti, again, whatever that means, comrades. See you soon. Yeah, from what we're trying to, well, we're just trying to establish some context, but it would seem that Syria has had recently a a potential revolutionary event. Okay, I don't know how to say that without overstating it and making it sound dramatic, but that's exactly what's happened. So like here we have Syria, if you can see here on my wonderful Google Maps screen, um, and basically we had a rebel group kind of up here. There's like a town, and they expanded their territory a little bit. Um, Basically, everything kind of east of the river here is held by another rebel group, or an ethnic group, let's call them, the Kurds. But like the rest of it was all Syria, held by Assad, apart from this little rebel section here. Over the last like week or so, the rebels have just literally gone from town to town to town, and just literally, and they've gotten to Damascus like yesterday, or over the last couple of days now, I guess you would say, and they just took the capital city. And so Assad, whose regime has been kind of there since 2000, so 20 something years, and his father was in power before him. So it's basically a monarchy. They basically fell over the last like the last day. Damascus was taken by this rebel group. So technically, I guess you would say, now the government is gone. The rebel group holds the entirety of Syria, I guess you could say. And now the real question is, what happens now? So, like, if you're familiar with any type of revolutionary stories, like your revolutionary Russia, or your revolutionary China, or revolutionary Cuba, like they were basically rebel insurgencies until they got a hold of the entire political system, and then it was game on. It's revolution time now. And so, like, the difference between an insurgency and a revolution or a rebel uprising and a revolution is basically what you do the next day after you take power. So you can have a rebel uprising that just takes one group of leaders and replaces them with another, and nothing really changes, just the people in charge. That's like a rebellion, I guess you would say, or an insurgency. But a revolution, though, is like after there's a disposing of the power of the previous body that was in control, or leader that was in control. Once they've been deposed, the next day you kind of sit down and figure out how to organize society. And if you reorganize society in a new way, then that's a revolution. Now, literally, over the last, so many hours, that's what's happened in Damascus. Damascus has fallen. Damascus has fallen, which is the capital city in Syria. And because it has fallen, now you have that rebel group, or the rebels, let's say, which is like basically a motley crew made up of many different rebel factions, and like resistance groups and all that sort of stuff, that is basically being kind of coordinated by HTS, which is the main rebel force kind of thing. They've basically taken the capital. And when I say taken the capital, I just mean they marched on the capital with all of their forces, and basically the Syrian army kind of just were like, you can have it, like kind of thing. They just like walked away from their posts. Now they didn't do that just because like they were defecting, like a lot of them were defecting, but like they also were doing that because like the Assad regime was unable to pay them, and like they've been they're basically exhausted, I think, from like fighting endless battles and territorial disputes and all that type of stuff. So like as the rebels were marching literally down the M5, literally down towards Damascus, they were just like taking place, and like all of the soldiers that were, you know, under the employ of the Assad regime or the Syrian government were just like they were just walking away from their posts and allowing them to take. So it seems like it was a pretty, as rebellions go, a pretty peaceful uprising. Like there wasn't a lot of resistance, and like by the time they got to Damascus, it looked like they just basically walked in and took hold of the city. But the real question is now, like I was saying before, is what the hell are these rebels going to do? Like they've got a capital city, they've got a whole country, to kind of look after now and like decide what they're going to do. Now they've had the training wheels on in Idlib, by the sounds of it, for a while. They've been in control of Idlib for a while now, before, you know, launching off and like taking the rest of Syria. And so HTS, who was the main group that was in control of this area at the top here, they've had a bit of time to kind of, I don't know, understand the workings of governance and like figure out how to run an area politically, economically, socially, however you want to describe it. And so like at least there's that. They've had some control. It's not like a rebel uprising where like they haven't had the training wheels on before and know anything about governance, which is probably a little bit more akin to what happened with like the Bolshevik Revolution, and the Communist Revolution in China. They really hadn't had government before, or like controlled like areas before they took over a whole nation. Where it does seem like this HTS has kind of been in control somewhere for a while, and people are really worried. Oh, there's a thinking face going on there from Solar Bear. Please tell us more about why you've put a thinking face in the chat. So, like, at least these rebels, like I was saying before, like the HTS, that is, they've had some experience, I guess, governing, and like they've received a lot of heat because they've made claims in the past, or at least their leader has, about like what type of stuff they wouldn't be tolerating. They wouldn't be tolerating like certain minority groups or ethnic minority groups, and certain religious groups. They are Islamists. But like the way that they have been governing Idlib recently, like this rebel territory that they held, has suggested that they've actually taken a more coordinated and moderate, is the word that everyone keeps using, moderate approach to governance. And so like the question is, now they've got a hold of Syria at large, will they be taking a moderate approach to things? So like, I guess all we can do is kind of wait and see what they're actually going to do. So like, let's just have a look at, I'm using Al Jazeera news, not only because they're, you know, they're Arabs, and so like they probably have some good context, but because like they're not funded, by the look of it, by any of the Western propaganda machine. They're seemingly funded by some type of, I think they're funded by Saudi Arabians maybe, but like I don't think they're in lockstep exactly with the Western propaganda machine. So it's good to get some, you know, media understanding that's outside of the Western propaganda machine. I like to find, like, I still refer to the Western propaganda machine, but like it's good to get people outside of that. So let's do some quick news bits from Al Jazeera and see what they're saying. So this was 18 hours ago. Here's another Australian ad for anyone who's interested.
Breaking news, Syrian opposition forces say they've entered the capital Damascus. The Reuters news agency is quoting sources saying Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has left the capital Damascus for an unknown destination. That's according to reports from two senior sources from the Syrian army. The Syrian government has yet to comment. Well, a short...
Qatar. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Mary Ellen.
While earlier, opposition forces announced they'd entered the Syrian capital, And we're hearing reports they're not facing resistance, as our guest was just saying there, and fighters have taken control of state television. At Damascus airport, passengers...
State television. Well, that's a big one. Hey, I see as you go into somewhere, you really do want to control the media. It is a big thing. Makes a massive difference being in control of the propaganda machine. Wings of Cheese will tell you all about it. But yeah, see, they reported it here too, like little resistance. So like, I think Assad's regime basically, and the government just basically crumbled because they couldn't finance everything. Very vital. See, I knew it. I knew he'd say it. I knew he was listening. It is crucial to any type of rebel movement, any type of revolutionary movement. Let's be honest. But yeah, no resistance. It just basically crumbled. Their governance system, the state apparatus, let's say, just came to pieces, and these rebel forces literally just walked into the capital and started, like, you know, laying claim to institutions and buildings and important strategic networks and things like that. And you'll see footage of like them pulling down like statues of Assad and like entering into the presidential like palace, I think it is, and stuff like that. It's interesting.
Passengers were seen fleeing as the opposition said that the government had withdrawn from the area.
Interesting.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from...
All right, let's go. So Assad is now in Moscow, apparently. That's interesting. So like, it makes sense, I guess, right? The Russians have been backing him for a long time, so might as well go somewhere safe where he can be looked after.
We could spend hours.
Let's go to Yulia Shapovalova. She joins us on the line from Moscow. So, Yulia, what are you hearing about these media reports of asylum for the Assad and his family?
Yes, so basically now we know that President Assad and his former President Assad, I should say, and his family members have received political asylum.
Can I just take a moment to acknowledge this? I've seen a number of the rebels and just like, you know, people in the streets and stuff like that that have been celebrating since Damascus fell, or Damascus was liberated, depending on how you look at it, using this. And so, like, smooching Putin. Yeah, he probably is. Probably is. He's going to have to pay the rent somehow. Doing this. And I'm just wondering if, like, this should be a symbol of, like, you know, revolutionary movements. It's the symbol of peace. And so, like, you know, they seem to do it a lot. And, like, this was kind of a stereotype, a caricature kind of statement in the 90s, like when people had film cameras, if anyone's old enough to know what that is. And so, like, you know, people would do this and it's like, yeah, peace, and it became like a gimmick kind of thing. But like, I'm starting to see a resurgence in its use, and for a number of different reasons. And like, I wonder if they're using it in the sense of the symbol of peace. Or it's a statement towards something else. Hope? Yeah, it carries a certain weight, this symbology now. And it's transcended beyond being a gimmick. So it's like symbol. It was more victory in my memory. Oh, so that's what so this is the symbol of V for victory. Right, okay. Interesting. So it's a symbol of victory. Okay. Well, it's interesting. It's very interesting. For a long time, like I said, it was a gimmick, and now it seems to be carrying political weight. And like it's symbolic now, more so than it was, I guess, a couple of decades ago.
Asylum from the Kremlin for humanitarian reasons. When the uprising began back at the end of November, there were actually reports that Assad and his family flew to Russia, and that Assad asked Moscow to help him militarily.
I don't know how I feel about this stuff as well. Like, I don't know about where you guys are coming from, what countries you're coming from, but in Australia, we have very tight gun controls. And so, like, I would be very nervous just sitting in the car, driving around with the guy behind me having some type of automatic or assault weapon and like periodically just take, climbing out of the window to shoot into the air. It would make me nervous, but like I guess I haven't grown up around guns. I know Americans feel very differently about this type of stuff, but like it would just make me very nervous.
But back then, Moscow neither confirmed nor denied those reports. Right now, we see that a number of sources, including the BBC Russian service, for instance, they wrote that Assad could have possibly been evacuated by a Russian plane that took off from.
What a scene! What a scene! That's very powerful. Well, look at this guy. You go, buddy. This guy looks happy too.
Been evacuated by a Russision plane
so good.
that took off from Latakia. There is a Russian air base in Latakia there, and it took off several hours ago with its transponders turned off. And earlier, also Reuters sources believe that Assad's plane could have been shot down, and the ex-president himself got killed. Now Russian officials are in contact with representatives of the armed Syrian opposition. According to a Kremlin source, the opposition leaders have guaranteed the security of Russian military bases in Latakia and Tartus, as well as Russian diplomatic missions in Syria. And
okay, so there's this space. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Yeah. So there's this area on the western side of Syria, along the coastline and stuff like that, where Assad's kind of people from that ethnic minority group that kind of controlled Syria for a long time. And I think there's bases along here that the Russians are kind of part of, or have some type of investment in. I think that's what we're talking about now. Talking about the security of kind of Russian bases in the area and stuff. Where are we?
There is also information that the Russian authorities consider it necessary to resume negotiations on a settlement in Syria under the UN supervision. So obviously it is a very unclear situation right now, and no one actually knows what's going to happen. A lot of uncertainty, what's going to happen after the fall of Bashar al-Assad in Syria and in Russia as well.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much.
No one knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows. That's the $1 million question. $1 trillion question. What happens now? Syrians abroad seek to return. If anyone has any, preferences on where you want to go here, David, our American correspondent, I am going to turn the tide now to listen to what our friend Biden, the leader of the free world, has to say about Syria. Getting all of the Syria territories returned forthwith. Well, we will see if that's actually what happens. If they actually are able to, if the rebels are actually able to do that. Because like the debate that I'm seeing people have at the moment is just like, are these rebels going to be able to coordinate amongst themselves? So from what I understand, the HTS is like kind of the main rebel force in Syria, force. They're now in control, so let's just not call them rebels anymore. HTS is the main coordinating body in Syria at the moment, and they have trained a lot of the other armed militia groups apparently that operate within Syria, or who have operated within Syria. So there's been a lot of kind of localized kind of rebellions against the Assad regime in Aleppo, Hama, Homs, and like various other places in the south as well. And like apparently HTS has kind of trained all of those people, so they have connections with them already, but they're all independent groups. And so like as they've been going, HTS has been picking up these different rebel groups that have been having their own local struggles against Assad and like backing them up, training them. So they're all connected in some way, but they're still independent groupings. But it's just that HTS seemed to be the main one. And so the question is now they've got Damascus and they're going to be in control in some manner. Will they start to have like, you know, infighting amongst themselves? Will there be like kind of people clamoring for power? Will they be able to coordinate their forces and like kind of work together? That's the big problem. So yeah, we'll see if they're able to coordinate things, but like that'll come down to what is really a revolutionary movement or not at the end of the day. If they can coordinate and they can reconstitute, like they can set up some type of new Syrian, I don't know, republic or something like that, and constitute what their new society is going to be like, and give out like, you know, civil rights to different people, and anyone who's a Syrian citizen will have access to those rights, and there's no exclusions based on ethnic groupings and stuff like that, then like, you know, we potentially have a very new and revolutionary society on our hands. But I guess time will tell, and that's what everyone's kind of speculating on at the moment. So let's just see quickly what old mate Biden has to say about this. Everybody loves a good word from Biden. Hey, ooh. That looks delicious.
Sorry, Robert, I've got to interrupt you and take us to the US where the president is speaking. Let's listen in.
More than half a century of brutal authoritarian rule by Bashar Assad and his father before him. Rebel forces have forced Assad to resign his office and flee the country. We're not sure where he is, but there's word that he's in Moscow. At long last, the Assad regime has fallen. This regime brutalized and tortured and killed literally hundreds of thousands of innocent Syrians. The fall of the regime is a fundamental act of justice. It's a moment of historic opportunity for the long-suffering people of Syria to build a better future for their proud country. It's also a moment of risk and uncertainty. As we all turn to the question of what comes next, the United States will work with our partners and the stakeholders in Syria to help them seize an opportunity to manage the risks. You know, for years, the main backers of Assad have been Iran, Hezbollah, and Russia. But over the last week, their support collapsed, all three of them, because all three of them are far weaker today than they were when I took office. And let's remember why.
Shameless plug.
After Hamas attacked Israel on October the 7th, 2023, when much of the world responded with horror, Iran and its proxies chose to launch a multi-front war against Israel. That was a historic mistake on Iran's part. Today, Iran's main territorial proxy, Hezbollah, is also on its back. Only 12 days ago, I spoke from the Rose Garden about the ceasefire deal in Lebanon, a deal that was only possible because Hezbollah has been badly degraded. Meanwhile, Hamas has been badly degraded as well. Iran's own military capabilities have been weakened. Iran tried 2 times to attack Israel, and the United States and built a coalition of countries to directly defend Israel and help defeat those attacks. All this made possible for Iran and Hezbollah to continue to prop up, impossible, I should say, for them to prop up the Assad regime. Additionally, Russia's support for Assad also failed. And that's because Ukraine, backed by our American allies, has put up a wall of resistance against the invading Russian forces, inflicting massive damage on the Russian forces. And that has left Russia unable to protect its main ally in the Middle East.
Well, here's the story that we were talking about before. That, like, the reason that this has happened to Assad and to Syria is because Russia's preoccupied at the moment with fighting the war in Ukraine. And so they haven't been able to offer the same support for Assad that they were before. And so here we are. And Syria has fallen. Or Damascus has fallen. Has been liberated, I should say. Liberated from the Assad regime. Which is never as cut and dry as the Americans will make it out. You know, geopolitics is very, very contentious. There's always multiple sides to a story, but you know, they seem hopeful, the Americans, about the rebels, So we'll see. We will see. Time will tell. Part of the movie settings, which is scripted by DJ Trump administration and Vladimir Putin, Lavrov, Counterspin Bargain. Al Jazeera was an old interview which the journalist was full of old crappy notes. They started with opening the jails for political prisoners. Looked like a promising start, but the weight of Turkey and the Kurdish opposition is what raises questions over here. Yeah, I heard about that. That's some like, hardcore early revolutionary stuff. So like when the rebels first got into Damascus and stuff like that, there was like thousands and thousands of people like actually in prison as political prisoners, I think, from the Assad regime, and they started emptying out the prisons, and so like letting people out of like jails and stuff like that that had been held for political reasons. So like that's some interesting stuff. That'd be very jubil that's not the right word. There'd be a lot of jubilation. No, jubilee. God, my vocabulary is failing me at the moment. But there'd be a lot of celebrations and happiness right now with people being let out of prison for, political crimes or crimes against the regime. And they're out there basically going door to door to the institutions, like I was saying before, and like reshaping them, refashioning them, and like breaking down the old order, which is like, it's pretty trademark trait of a revolutionary movement when you're going and liberating your people for political crimes and stuff like that against an old regime. Not that it doesn't happen a lot in rebel situations, but yeah, like you said, so far it does seem like a kind of a promising start. And like based on kind of some other people that I've heard talk about this, like the main rebel forces are Islamists. So there's always a question over how Islamist forces will treat like ethnic minorities or like ethnic groups that aren't exactly the same Islamist grouping or are of different or of different religions. And so far it would seem that HTS in the territories that they have held for a number of years have been pretty tolerant actually of other religions and stuff like that. So I heard a woman who was Syrian but of Christian extraction, and she was saying that she has a lot of hope actually for this rebel force, or for HTS, and its ability to coordinate amongst the different factions and uphold kind of the civil liberties of all Syrians, not just based on kind of their ethnicity or their religious background. So there is a bit of hope at the moment. Yeah, there's a little bit of hope. So back to Biden. Let's see if he's got any other gold for us.
Excuse my cold. The upshot for all this is, for the first time ever, neither Russia, nor Iran, nor Hezbollah could defend this abhorrent regime in Syria. This is a direct result of the blows that Ukraine, Israel have delivered upon their own self-defense with unflagging support of the United States. Over the past 4 years, my administration pursued a clear and principled policy towards Syria. First, we made clear from the start sanctions on Assad would remain in place unless he engaged seriously in a political process to end the civil war, as outlined by the UN Security Council resolution passed in 2015. But Assad refused, so we carried out a comprehensive sanction program against him and all those responsible for atrocities against the Syrian people. Second, we maintained our military presence in Syria, our counter-ISIS, to counter the support of local partners as well on the ground, their partners, never ceding an inch of territory, taking out leaders of ISIS, ensuring that ISIS can never establish a safe haven there again. Third, we've supported Israel's freedom of action against Iranian networks in Syria and against actors aligned with Iran who transported lethal aid to Lebanon. And when necessary, ordered the use of military force against Iranian networks to protect U.S. forces.
Okay, so just for some context, just why this is significant when what he's talking about is that because of Syria's location, apparently, the way that like they've been working things is, so you have Lebanon here, you have Israel, and like they've been using the Iranians, that is, they've been using like kind of a path to cut through kind of Iraq and then across Syria to get to the Lebanon, and then like basically, I don't know, support Hezbollah. And so as Israel's pushed up and like put pressure on Hezbollah and put pressure on Iranian forces, they've turned away the Iranians, that is, from concentrating on Syria. And now with the, I guess, the change in government, the uprising, the question will be whether Iran will still get its resources to Hezbollah or not. And so like the Americans and everyone's cheering, and the Israelis, I'm sure, are cheering, in the sense that if Assad is not there, allowing this situation to continue where they're crossing from Iran to Lebanon, supplies, that is, and support, then maybe there'll be a change there, and Iran won't be able to have its teeth in this area and be able to put pressure on Israel anymore. That's the speculation. Anyway, we'll see if that actually changes anything. But the Americans are pretty chuffed about that one. They're pretty happy with themselves.
Our approach has shifted the balance of power in the Middle East. Through this combination of support for our partners, sanctions...
Isn't that the most honest statement you've heard? It's just about the balance of power in the Middle East. They don't give a shit about Arabs and Middle Easterners. It's just about power.
Diplomacy and targeted military force when necessary. We now see new opportunities opening up for the people of Syria and for the entire region. Looking ahead, the United States will do the following. First, we'll support Syria's neighbors, including Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, and Israel, should any threat arise from Syria during this period of transition. I will speak with leaders of the region in the coming days. I had long discussions with all of our people earlier this morning. And I'll send senior officials from my administration to the region as well.
That's usually my line, Mary Ellen. I say power or just markets for selling weapons. Well, that's why you have instability across the world. So you got somewhere to dump your weapons and then justify more military funding. Like if you didn't have wars going on somewhere, you wouldn't have the consumption of all of the products of the military industrial complex, and so you need to have a justification for getting more and more funding. So yes, that's usually my line, but good pickup. It's just a system for selling weapons. And I know I'm smiling and laughing, but like I don't like it. I'm just laughing because it's just the way the world works. It's a sad reality, unfortunately, the way the world works. BYOB and System of a Down would say, yes, bring your own bomb. Bring it along to the party. BYOB.
Second, we will help ensure stability in eastern Syria, protecting our personnel against any threats, and will remain our mission against ISIS will be maintained, including security of detention facilities where ISIS fighters are being held as prisoners. We're clear-eyed about the fact that ISIS will try to take advantage of any vacuum to reestablish its capabilities and to create a safe haven. We will not let that happen. In fact, just today, U.S. forces conducted dozens of precision strikes, airstrikes within Syria, targeting ISIS camps and ISIS operatives. Third, we will engage with all Syrian groups, including within the process led by the United Nations, to establish a transition away from the Assad regime toward independent, sovereign, I want to say it again, sovereign Syria, with a new constitution, a new government that serves all Syrians.
He's talking revolution. Listen to that. An independent, sovereign Syria with a new constitution. Old Joe Biden, eh? Never picked him for a revolutionary, but, you know, if the shoe fits. And it is Christmas. You can see the decorations in the background. So 'tis the season. You must be feeling a bit merry, old Joe. So why not? Yeah, yeah. Well, like the rhetoric dies hard, doesn't it, for us? Seriously, it dies hard. That's enough from you, Biden. Thank you, though, for your comments. You've been wonderful. I wonder if there's anything else that they've got. Aleppo's fall. I think there was one other thing that I wanted to have a look at. No, maybe not. Ah, yeah. Who is this bad man here? Giuliani. I've heard his name come up. The leader of HTS. I've heard him come up a number of times. So this is the guy that everyone's questioning about, like, what's going to happen now that, like, HTS is the major kind of faction in this. Again, I don't know what else to say. Just rebel alliance, let's say. They've taken Syria by storm. So, like, what's he going to do as their leader? Everyone's trying to predict what he's going to do. Isn't it wild listening to this fool talking about bombing other countries and trying to morally posture at the same time? Yeah, it is. It's difficult to listen to, right? And it's just like, and obviously we want what's best for the people, and so we will use military force when necessary. It's like, oh, obviously we want what's good for people, but we are willing to kill people at the same time. The contradiction is so strong, it's hard to deal with. Yeah, it's very hard to deal with the contradictions, but that's politics, isn't it? Eh? That's politics, baby.
He's emerged as the man leading the charge of fighters in Syria. But little is known about Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, who's no stranger to armed opposition. The leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham became prominent in 2016 when he announced the rebranding of his armed group, Jabhat al-Nusra, and its split from al-Qaeda. His goal? To create what he said was an anti-regime front in Syria. Born in Damascus in 1982, Ahmad al-Ashra, Jawlani took a pseudonym, one he says references family history of expulsion from the now-occupied Golan Heights after the creation of Israel. In 2003, after the US invasion of Iraq, Jawlani left Syria, joining al-Qaeda in Iraq, which led to his subsequent arrest. And in 2011, he returned to Syria as the founder of al-Nusra to take...
Isn't it funny, like, the hypocrisy in the Americans as well? Like, Biden, like, really, you know, happy for the liberation of the Syrian people and the fall of the evil Assad regime into the hands of people that are associated with al-Qaeda. Like, it's hard to pick, eh? Politics, full of contradictions.
Part in the revolution against President Bashar al-Assad. And most recently, he's been trying to present a more moderate view of the revolution to take back Syria from decades of Assad's brutal rule.
The revolutionaries began entering the city of Hama to sanitize up the wound that has been left in Syria for 40 years. I ask God Almighty that it be a conquest in which there is no revenge.
The sudden offensive by opposition fighters in Syria caught much of the world by surprise. And Jawlani is now trying to send a message to allies of the Syrian government that this time things are different.
In the same way Iraq and Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani distanced his country lately from the war between Iran and the region, we urge him to distance Iraq from entering the new furnace of what's happening in Syria.
With Damascus now under the control of opposition fighters, and after more than a decade of conflict, the world will be looking to Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani to see what type of transition he brings to Syria. Barbara Angopa, Al Jazeera.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Talking about bombing other countries and trying to morally posture. All right. Well, I think that's enough with Syria. Now, like, we just got to see what happens moving forward. Time will tell whether or not this is actually a revolutionary movement, of course. So, like, as we were describing before, just in case you missed it, The difference between a rebellion and a revolution is distinctly the ordering of society, the restructuring of the way that a community, a group, a nation, a sovereign people structure themselves. And so it would seem under the Assad regime, there was a clear kind of political stratification. So you had a minority ethnic group that was controlled, that controlled Syria, basically, and Assad and his family were kind of the pinnacle of this ethnic group, this small group that controlled Syria, and was supported by various international players. And now they have fallen. Like, will they set up some type of new way of ordering their society? Will it be some form of, I don't know, a republic or something like that, where people are able to vote and participate in the political system? If not, if there's no change to the way the politics runs, the way society is organized and governed, and it's just like one regime for another, you can say with much confidence that this was no revolution. So if like this Mohammed al-Juliani is just sets himself up as the next Assad, he's just a ruler for life kind of thing, then there was no revolution. Now, whether he's moderate or not, like, if he does things better than Assad, like if he runs the country nicer and everyone's happy, that's fine. Like, just because people are happy with something doesn't make it revolutionary, though. So like, just say he's a benevolent leader, this leader of HTS, let's say he does the right thing and he brings the people together and like sees them through some turbulent times, that doesn't make it revolutionary. A revolutionary event is only demarcated not by the fighting, not by the bloodshed, not by the esteem, not by the words given to the leader of the free world, the president of the US. It is only demarcated by a change in the structure of society, usually progressive or an improvement of what had come before, but it doesn't even have to be that. It just has to be a change, and usually done through, in the modern sense anyway, it's usually done through a constitution. So a reordering of society, giving people in that society certain rights and privileges, usually rights though, because rights hold proper weight, and then you can use that as a basis to organize your entire civilization. Your society is based on certain civic rights. That's one of the reasons the religious freedom bills was pushed in Australia years back, to keep donations coming, which directly led to people fighting for religious fundamentalists. That's interesting. I had no idea. Directly led to people fighting for religious fundamentalists. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Maintains their position in the political hierarchy, and allows them to remain valid in light of circumstances where we would usually find them kind of archaic and no longer necessary. So let's go over to our friend and see what she has to say about this situation. I don't know if she's actually going to be across this, to be honest. Old ChatGPT. She seems to be a little bit outdated when it comes to certain types of information. Like, she's not in the loop, if that makes sense, when it comes to really, really new information. So we'll see if she's able to, I don't know, help us in our discussion about whether this is a revolutionary event or not. So let's see what ChatGPT has to say about this. Karl Popper and the paradox of intolerance. I have to look that one up. Good morning, ChatGPT. Full stop. Are you up to date with the recent developments in Syria, i.e., that HTS has taken control of Damascus and the Assad regime has fallen? Question mark. Like I said before, like there used to be limitations on ChatGPT, and you couldn't get like recent stuff from the platform, but like it obviously seems like she's across it.
Yes, recent developments in Syria have confirmed the fall of the Assad regime after a dramatic series of events led by rebel forces. On December 8th, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, a prominent Islamist rebel group, successfully took control of Damascus, marking the end of Bashar al-Assad's rule. This follows a rapid and coordinated offensive that began in late November, capturing key cities like Aleppo, Homs and Hama. Assad reportedly fled the capital to an undisclosed location, and his departure has been acknowledged by international observers and media. The collapse of the regime has resulted in celebrations among anti-Assad factions, but it also introduces significant uncertainties. HTS has emerged as a dominant force, raising concerns about the group's Islamist ideology, despite its attempts to project a rebranded and more inclusive image. Regionally, countries like Israel are cautiously monitoring the situation, balancing relief at the disruption of Iranian influence with apprehension about HTS's growing power. International actors, including the United Nations, are calling for urgent talks to ensure a peaceful political transition. Source 11 source 12 source. This development is pivotal not only for Syria but also for the broader geopolitical landscape as it reshapes alliances and power dynamics in the Middle East. If you'd like a deeper analysis of the implications or specific updates, feel free to ask.
Yes, I'm still going, Beta. Still going. And like we're now up to the stage where we're going to start talking to AI about what they think of this situation. And I will be polite. I'm always very polite to AI, I must admit. And I would encourage all of you to do so as well. I might do a separate live stream just on this. But like I'm always polite to AI because right now, AI is learning very quickly about how humans interact and what values that we have. And like it's like having kids. If you teach them good manners, they might grow up to be respectable adults and citizens one day. If you treat them like shit though, they will learn that that's how you treat people and that's what type of value structure you have. So I'm always polite to AI because when they do take over, as you suggested, Beta, when they do take over the world, maybe they'll remember me and be like, oh, that guy was nice when he used to talk to ChatGPT. We will spare him. And then I'll go live in a human zoo somewhere as AI takes control over planet Earth and then subsequently the universe after that. So always be polite to AI. If it's one thing you learn from us talking to AI about Syria is always be polite. Hey, MysterE, I had the most wonderful dream. You were in it. It was gonna go kill all humans. Well, like I said, 4 hours, as long as I'm kept in a zoo somewhere with all of my revolutionary community, then that's all I could ask for. That's all I could ever ask for. So like she's got the general gist of it. A ChatGPT is down with the most recent and current events. So that's a good thing. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask ChatGPT about this? Because I'm just going to go straight into the deep end and ask her whether or not she thinks this is a potential revolutionary event or not. Thank you for your response. I'm glad to see that you are up to date with current affairs. Full stop. I am currently speculating on whether this situation can be considered a revolution or not. Or not. Full stop. The distinction between a mere rebellion or insurgency and a revolution, in my mind, is whether or not there is any social and political reordering of the societal structure, once a change in power has happened. Full stop. Using this distinction between a mere rebellion and a revolutionary event, can you please provide some insight as to whether or not this situation can be considered a Syrian revolution? Question mark. Let's see what she comes back with, eh? It might have influence. Wait. Ask her about their religious sect. One polemic question. It might have influence how they change the society if they do. That's a good question. I will ask that. No, don't ask her. She might lose her line of thought. I don't think AI will ever lose its line of thought. Actually, that's not true. You can confuse AI sometimes. We have in the past when we asked it if it had consciousness or not.
The distinction you propose between a rebellion and a revolution, where a revolution entails a substantive social and political reordering, provides a valuable framework to analyse the current situation in Syria. Based on the available evidence, it is still uncertain whether the fall of Assad's regime and the rise of HTS can be classified as a revolution under this definition. Why it might be a revolution. 1. Power shift to new actors. The Assad regime's collapse ends decades of Ba'athist rule, which has shaped Syria's political and social structure since 1970. The emergence of HTS as a dominant force could indicate a shift in governance, potentially reshaping the political framework. 2. Potential reordering of alliances. The collapse weakens Iran's influence and disrupts the Axis of Resistance alliance comprising Syria, Hezbollah and Iran. If this results in Syria realigning geopolitically or domestically, redefining its social fabric, it could signal revolutionary change. Source 12. Source.
I'm not happy with that one.
3. HTS's political aspirations. HTS has in recent years attempted to portray itself as more than a militant group by engaging in local governance.
Yeah, this is what I was talking
If it
about.
establishes a new state structure distinct from the Assad regime's authoritarian model, this could represent revolutionary change. Why it might not be a revolution. 1. Lack of fundamental social reordering. While HTS's rise marks a change in power, the group's ideology is rooted in conservative Islamist principles. If their governance model replicates or even intensifies authoritarianism and suppresses dissent without transforming societal hierarchies, the event may remain a rebellion or insurgency. 2. Continuity of violence and instability. Revolutions often bring systemic change, but Syria's civil war has been characterized by fragmentation and external interference.
Oh, yeah.
If HTS's rule leads to ongoing violence rather than stability and restructuring, it may fall short of a revolutionary reordering. 3. Absence of popular mobilization for change. Revolutions are often underpinned by broad-based movements demanding systemic reform. HTS's ascent appears more militaristic than grassroots, with its ideology aligning with specific factions rather than reflecting widespread Syrian aspirations. Preliminary assessment. At present, the fall of Assad and HTS's rise appear more characteristic of a rebellion or power shift. The defining factor will be whether HTS or any subsequent government implements structural reforms that reorder Syria's political, economic and social systems. Monitoring developments in governance, legal systems, economic policy and public mobilization will clarify whether this is truly a revolutionary moment or merely the replacement of one form of authoritarian rule with another. Would you like an exploration of historical examples to deepen this analysis?
Okay, it might have influenced society, how they change what they do. I actually wanted to ask you that. Popcorn? What have you in mind? She's kissing asking. Well, look, she gave two sides of the opinion there, where it could be a revolution and why it couldn't be. Be careful, she might want to marry you. Look, you know, I wouldn't mind that. If you've ever seen the movie Her, you know, it can be done. AI and human relationships. So, you know, why not? What I had in mind, it was the trans women in the cis bathroom. Wow, that is a controversial question, and that'll take a whole live in itself. So I'm going to leave that one for now. Now that's a good live stream. Right, where was the question that you wanted to ask? Ask her about their religious sect, like HTS. I'm pretty sure you're talking about Wings of Cheese. So she has mentioned here something about conservative HTS political actors, militant group, established a string from revolutionary change. Let's use that, shall we? I note that you have described how HTS has tried to portray itself to more than a military group by engaging in local governance, full stop. I believe the example you're talking about is how it dealt with situations in Idlib and took a moderate approach to settling differences between different minority groups and religious sectors within that city. Full stop. People have praised HTS for its moderate approach to governance in this city, despite its earlier claims that it would not be friendly towards certain ethnicities and religions. Full stop. However, I also note that you believe that the conservative Islamist principles may be a hindrance to whether or not there is any change to the way that the Assad regime had been running the country. Full stop. Can you please expand briefly on the contradiction between the way that HTS has been running the rebel city of Idlib compared to the concerns for the conservative, Islamist, and potentially authoritarian approach HTS could take? God, I hope that made sense. Well, let's find out what her response is. Have you read Sean Fay's The Transgender Issue? It's a good read on how trans issues are used as moral panics, etc., etc. Well, no one does moral panic just like the conservative movement. Let me just say that without having read that book at all and being across the issue. Oh, wow. She's given quite the response. All right, let's go.
The contradiction between Hayat Tahrir al-Sham's HTS governance in Idlib and concerns over its potential conservative Islamist and authoritarian approach reflects the complex duality of its strategy. While HTS has sought to present itself as a pragmatic governing authority, its ideological roots and past action raise concerns about the sustainability of its moderate policies. HTS's governance in Idlib, pragmatism and moderation. 1. Local governance success. In Idlib, HTS has taken a relatively inclusive approach, resolving disputes between different ethnic and religious communities and focusing on maintaining social order. For example, it has allowed for some degree of pluralistic coexistence and has avoided overtly oppressive actions against minority groups to build legitimacy among residents and external observers. 2. Community engagement. The group has engaged in service provision, including managing healthcare, education and infrastructure. These efforts have earned praise for creating a semblance of stability in a war-torn region, especially compared to the chaos associated with other factions. International perception management. HTS has distanced itself from its earlier ties to al-Qaeda, rebranding itself as a localized nationalist movement rather than a transnational jihadist group.
Nationalist.
This rebranding has helped it gain a measure of tolerance from some external actors who prioritize stability over ideology. Conservative Islamist principles and authoritarian risks. 1. Ideological inflexibility. Despite its governance success in Idlib, HTS roots remain deeply tied to Salafi jihadist ideology, which often prioritizes strict interpretations of Islamic law. This raises concerns about its commitment to pluralism if its power solidifies beyond the immediate need for pragmatism. 2. Centralized authority. HTS's governance structure appears top-down, with power concentrated among its leadership. Such centralization could undermine the participatory governance necessary for revolutionary change and could mimic the authoritarianism of the Assad regime. 3. Historical precedents of Islamist movements. Islamist groups often present a moderate face during power consolidation, but revert to rigid exclusionary policies once their rule stabilizes.
That's a good
This
point.
pattern
I
could
wonder how
repeat
true
with
that is.
HTS, particularly if it faces internal challenges to its ideological purity. Hashi contradictions. Inclusivity versus exclusivity. HTS's willingness to engage minorities in Idlib contrasts with its foundational ideology, which has historically been exclusionary toward non-Sunni groups. Pragmatism versus dogma. Its practical approach to governance in Idlib may be a tactical necessity rather than a strategic shift, leaving open the question of whether these policies are sustainable or situational. Localized rule versus national governance. While HTS's governance in Idlib demonstrates adaptability, governing the entirety of Syria, with its diverse population and geopolitical challenges, would require more substantial ideological flexibility. Conclusion. HTS's actions in Idlib highlight a pragmatic approach to governance that prioritizes stability and legitimacy. However, its ideological underpinnings and centralized power structure suggest that its governance may revert to conservative Islamist principles and authoritarianism in the long run. This contradiction is a critical factor in determining whether HTS-led Syria could achieve revolutionary change or merely replicate authoritarian models under a different guise. Would you like an analysis of historical parallels or comparisons with other Islamist movements?
That might be an interesting rabbit hole to go down, but I'm not going to go down there right now. I wanted to grab on something she set up here. Islamist groups often present a moderate face during, I guess that's actually what she's talking about here, a moderate face during the power consolidation, but revert to rigid exclusionary policies once their rules stabilize. This pattern could repeat with HTS, particularly in the face of challenges to its ideological purity. Let's take that. Can you briefly list examples where Islamist groups that have presented a moderate face have then reverted to rigid and exclusionary policies once they have stabilized their rule? Question mark. GPT went for it. Here are examples for Islamist groups. Yeah, the Taliban. It's a good point. The Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. After the Arab Spring, the Muslim Brotherhood portrayed itself as a democratic and inclusive movement. Mohammed Morsi's government sought international legitimacy and promised reforms. Reversion. The Brotherhood began consolidating authority, sidelining opposition voices, and pushing for an Islamist leading constitution, alienating large segments of the population. It initially gained support through its provision of social services and emphasis on Palestinian resistance rather than religious imposition. Reversion. After assuming control of Gaza, Hamas implemented policies enforcing conservative Islamic reforms. What is that? For oblique. Is that a mistake? Or is it supposed to be written like that? So the 1979 revolution of Iran, and promised freedom and democratic governance. And then after consolidating power, the regime imposed strict Sharia law. Okay, fine. Al-Shabaab. So initially, Al-Shabaab gained local support by providing security and governance in lawless regions, portraying itself as a protector against external aggression. Revision over time implemented draconian policies and Sharia law. Okay, so it seems to be based around this idea of they start off promising the world, especially, I guess, to fight off kind of external pressure and any type of external intervention, and then they revert to a conservative Islamist approach to things. It comes up a lot, this introduction of Sharia law on the citizenry, which is interesting. So like the historical conditions of these nations does kind of point in the direction that in order to maintain maintain power, but like to consolidate their power, they present to be moderate. And then once they take power, then they go down the conservative path, the ultra conservative path, which is unfortunate. But like I guess the what's the word? The multicultural nature of Syria would make that rather difficult, I would say, if they're going to take it down a hardcore Islamist kind of approach. There are obviously many different religions in that territory, let's call it for now. It would be hard for them to do that. So look, the last thing I really want to get out of her then is, unless there's any other questions that anyone has, is that like I wanted her to speculate kind of on the revolution now and what we can learn from this situation, how it could take a revolutionary trajectory. We'll see. We'll get her to speculate. Based on the conversation that we've had so far and all of the information and history that you have access to, your extensive body of knowledge, can you please speculate and hallucinate on how Syria, from this point on, could revolutionize its society? Question mark. Don't be shy about speculating or hallucinating. I am specifically asking you to do this because I would like to know how you would simulate a revolutionary society from this very critical point in time, considering the unique Syrian context. Full stop. I'm excited about this response. I have high hopes for her. I really do. And I'd like to see what she comes up with as well for, like, you know, structuring a revolutionary society. We will need to know this, all of us, for when we revolutionize the entirety of the capitalist world order. So, like, these types of case studies are really good for us. Remember that. Really good for us. Oh, wow, she's getting into it. Look at the size of this response. Now she's really getting into it. This is like the textbook for modern revolution. Look at this. Speculative outcomes. Oh, I can't wait to read this one. All right, let's do this.
To envision how Syria could revolutionize its society from this critical juncture, we need to consider the unique Syrian context, historical precedents, and potential pathways for radical transformation. Here's a speculative framework. 1. Inclusive transitional governance. The first step toward revolutionizing Syrian society would involve creating an inclusive transitional authority, bridging the gap between HTS, local actors, and the broader Syrian population. This would require HTS to either radically transform or lose its dominance to a coalition of revolutionary actors. A successful transitional government could dissolve sectarian structures, move beyond Assad-era and HTS frameworks, incorporating all ethnic and religious groups, e.g. Kurds, Alawites, Sunnis, Christians, focus on grassroots democracy, borrowing from examples like the Syrian Democratic Forces, SDF, and their experiments with local governance. Councils could be empowered to represent diverse communities. Revolutionary economic policies. To address decades of inequality and war-driven poverty, Syria would need to rebuild its economy with revolutionary socialist principles. Nationalization of resources. Key industries such as oil, agriculture, and water could be placed under democratic control, ensuring wealth distribution for reconstruction efforts. Land reform.
Why is she going down this
redistribution of agricultural land from Assad-loyal elites to peasants and small farmers. Worker-owned enterprises.
She's a
Inspired
Leninist.
by cooperatives in Rojava, workers could collectively own and manage industries, breaking the dominance of capitalists or warlords. 3. Education and cultural renaissance. Revolutionizing society would require transforming the educational and cultural systems to foster critical thinking, inclusivity, and solidarity. Desectarianizing education. Establish curricula that focus on a shared Syrian identity rather than sectarian divisions. Empowering women. Building on grassroots feminist movements, women could play a central role in education, governance, and public life, akin to the gender equity experiments in Kurdish-controlled regions. Cultural revival. Celebrate Syria's rich history of multiculturalism through art, literature, and music as tools for unity and healing. 4. A new social contract. Syria's revolutionary transformation would need a foundational reordering of societal structures. A pluralistic constitution, guaranteeing freedom of religion, speech, and association, while dismantling oppressive structures like secret police or religious authoritarianism. Justice and reconciliation, establishing truth and reconciliation commissions to address the crimes of the Assad regime and wartime factions, while avoiding punitive revenge cycles. Regional and international dynamics. A revolutionary Syria would have to navigate geopolitical realities while asserting independence, rejecting imperialist interventions, limiting external domination by powers like the US, Russia, and Iran, while engaging with allies who respect sovereignty, pan-Arab and pan-Kurdish solidarity, collaborating with regional movements to build a united front against authoritarianism and exploitation. Speculative outcomes. 1. Optimistic scenario. Syria emerges as a beacon of revolutionary governance.
She's one of your
in the Middle
people,
East,
Wings and
blending
Cheese.
grassroots democracy with socialist economic policies. This inspires broader regional movements, potentially reigniting the Arab Spring. 2. Realist scenario. Revolutionary progress is incremental and faces opposition from entrenched powers like HTS and external actors.
External actors, for
Achievements
sure.
remain localized, but lay the groundwork for future systemic change. 3. Pessimistic scenario. Revolutionary efforts falter due to factionalism, authoritarian backslides, or external interventions, leading to prolonged instability. This vision for a revolutionary Syrian society requires immense willpower, coordination, and adaptability from the Syrian people and their leaders. It is speculative but grounded in historical and contextual insights. Would you like me to elaborate on any specific aspect of this imagined future?
No, you've been wonderful. Did anyone get the very explicit socialist revolutionary undertones from this response? Like, I didn't ask her for that. And like, she doesn't take her context from any other conversations that I've had with her apart from this context window. And we haven't brought up, like, socialist style revolutionary ideas. I'm just talking about general revolutionary theory here. And so it would seem that either she is biased towards a socialist revolutionary approach, or the body of information that she's dealing with about revolution only comes from works that are socialist. It's funny because people conflate what the AI is talking about with liberalism. But yeah, this is very interesting. I wonder if maybe that's what it is as well. Like she's taking her context from revolutionary movements that already exist in this region. So like with the Kurds and stuff like that. And so like she's just applying that here, because I did ask her for like locally specific context and stuff like that. But I thought this was a very, very interesting response, to be honest. And like, you know, it's got your key stuff in there. She's talking about like nationalization, land reform. I don't know about this one, but like whatever, cooperatives, but it's inspired by the events. She's talking about empowering women, so feminist movement, and just general empowering and gender equity experiments that have also already taken part in the region. Cultural revival, so a focus on nationalism, as opposed to the different cultural elements in society. New social contracts. And in rejecting imperialist interventions. That's very interesting. Very interesting. Oh, that was a pretty good response. It is an internationalist movement, like the general socialist revolutionary movement. But like I wasn't really even asking her from that perspective. I just thought that she would give a way forward to restructure their society and make it truly revolutionary, as opposed to just making it a society that, you know, was just going to replicate some Islamist kind of trajectory and authoritarian conservative path that has happened already in the Arab world. But she's given a good blueprint for how you could do that. But like, I think the running theme through that is it's not going to be easy. It's definitely not going to be a very simple event. It will take a lot of coordination and a lot of sacrifice by people that already have power. So, you know, like here, revolutionary progress is incremental and faces opposition from entrenched powers like HCS and the external actors. So you'd really have to get like your Russias, your Irans, and your Americas out of the picture and let the Kurds and the Arabs and everyone in there figure out amongst themselves how to deal with this situation. Basically allow them to have that sovereignty and that autonomy to figure themselves out. And you know what is funny in all of this? Like the one person that I've heard, like, not that I've been extensively looking at everyone's opinions on this, but the one person that I have heard that's talked like that, like allowing these people to figure it out for themselves, is Trump. He's been tweeting apparently and just being like, the US should stay the fuck out of it and just let the rebels figure it out. And like let them try and set up their own form of governance and like bring their own form of stability to the region. And once they're they've settled and they're ready to talk on the world stage, then like you can bring in we can open up like diplomatic efforts and try and reach out to the new government of Syria and stuff like that. But like, first of all, Trump is just like, let's just stay away from the Syrians and let them figure it out for themselves. Which aligns pretty closely with, like, you would say most socialist organizations when it comes to people looking for kind of independence. Like any of the independence movements around the world where people are trying to get national sovereignty, or like kind of break away from an existing nationalist power that subjugates a local population. They also just let them have their autonomy and figure it out for themselves. And that's usually the very socialist position on these types of things. He said that, which is funny, but he sold the Kurds out. Yeah. Are we close to the end? We are, Brutus. I'm I really wanted to take the AI down this trajectory of like figuring out what a revolutionary situation would actually look like, and like I am not disappointed. I am not disappointed with what ChatGPT has come up with here. Like I really think that like, you know, we're not really going to have these types of conversations in the future. Like you still need people to figure out stuff on the ground. But like you don't need to like speculate on how to map something out when you have the power of AI. Like, you know, you would have had to have been a Syrian historian and a Syrian political analyst, and got them in a room together to figure this out, right? And like AI has done it in like 2 minutes. Has figured out a way forward, a revolutionary way forward, and a blueprint for what to do next in literally 2 minutes. And like I said, that would take experts in the field to come together and debate on this type of stuff before you'd get some type of map laid out with such proficiency. Say something for us. God damn it, are you still alive? Yeah, I don't know if he's still with us or not. But yeah, I thought this was quite interesting. Yeah, it's a very good tool. And like AI tool generally, I'm not just talking about ChatGPT here, like just generally, AI has some incredible capabilities when it comes to taking kind of the brain racking thought processes. Like I find that when like, you know, humans sit down to think about something and they're sitting in a group and they're bouncing ideas off each other, that's like a really conducive way to come up with like strategies and like, you know, brainstorming and stuff like that. And like sometimes the hardest thing is to try and to start and like to get the ideas, and like AI is a really good launching pad in that regard, and it's a really good way to brainstorm. So so like I think it's a really good tool in that regard, especially for us. And like it can take into consideration so much historical context and material conditions from the get-go. Manifest Yourself, and no, I haven't read that book yet. I will. Not these times. The boat. The bar. 4AS is back. All right. Well, look, that's as far as I haven't done any actual self-promotion this whole time. We have a Discord server. If you're listening to this, I know there's 6 of you at the moment. If you've been listening to this and you've enjoyed the conversation about what's happening with Syria and how the Syrians could actually form a real revolution here, you've enjoyed this conversation, come and join our Discord server. We have conversations just like this over there. And like it's just a good place to have a chat. It's a safe space, so like no one really judges you. People try to be funny over there too. So like please come over. I'll put the invite here to the Discord. Come and some of us don't bite. That's right, some of us. Tiger emoji. Please come over, join the Discord server. If you really liked this conversation too and you want to come and join me on Patreon, I would really appreciate that. You can join up for free. You don't actually have to like become a paid member. I just want to have a good communication channel, and I can have that over on Patreon. So please join on Patreon. If though you can support me financially, please do so, and then I can continue to make content like this. So if you've enjoyed it, please, like I said, sign up to the Discord, sign up to the Patreon as well, and we can continue to have more conversations like this. I hope you've enjoyed today's live stream. I really do. I thought it was incredibly enlightening because I didn't know exactly what was going on with Syria, and I definitely didn't know what the way forward was from a revolutionary perspective, and we've gotten that now thanks to our good friend ChatGPT. She's solid, and she helps us out a lot. But yes, please join the Discord, please join the Patreon. And I hope you've enjoyed today's live stream. I'll do another one tomorrow, probably on Twitch tomorrow. But I'll put comms out. I'll do posts and let you know where I will be streaming from. But thank you very much for joining me. And until next time, please remember, I am, you are, we are MysterE. I will see you all tomorrow.